All right, so let's go ahead and get started today.
All right, so what are we talking about today, Theo?
Today I decided that I wanted to focus on the importance of having purpose, which is really about value and meaning in your job and in your career and your work life. That's been a dominant conversation with a lot of the people that I've been coaching over the last 2 months. And I had a great conversation with one of the people in my coaching practice is a OBGYN, and she's like the head of her division. And she's struggling with that right now. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that.
Okay, well, let's start with that conversation. Like, what is her struggle? What is she trying to figure out?
Yeah, she's struggling with the same thing everybody is right now. It's overload,
Hmm.
overwork, and being so engrossed in just getting things done and keeping things going. So many organizations continue to be lean, just enough people to get things done so they can make profit margins. And just many leaders find very little time to celebrate in between accomplishments. When I ask leaders, here's something else we've been focused on since it's year end is what are you most proud of this year? What are some of your accomplishments? What progress have you made this year? And there's just this blank for so long because everybody's in the hamster wheel. They're not taking time to step back and really look at what did I accomplish? What did I do that really was meaningful this year? And so I just feel that it's good for us to sometimes connect back to the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing.
Sometimes we get so caught up in what we've accomplished, particularly professionally, right? We don't really stop to think about how those accomplishments align with purpose, right? And I think that's why so many people sometimes they get to a point they're like, is this all there is? Right? Because there is a disconnect, or they've not really thought about how is this aligned with how I see myself in terms of how what I'm supposed to contribute to the world, what my legacy will be. And all that's really tied to purpose, I think. What do you think?
I love that. I love that. And we lose sight of that so
Yeah.
often. Even myself, a lot of the people that I coach, executives, we're in the same boat.
Hmm.
Or either I've experienced that at some point, and when we're always talking about being uncensored and being authentic, that's one thing that I struggle with a lot is just fighting off burnout because to keep a demanding coaching practice really going, keeping people engaged, and really making it meaningful for people. It takes a lot of focus on purpose, but there's so many little things in between that have to be done. When I think about purpose, when I think about our work, there are two elements. There's the functional aspect of our work. That's what we do, our job tasks, our job description. And then there's the purpose. Why? Why do we do it? What brings value and meaning? And so often, just like many others, because we're human, I get so caught up in all the functional tasks that even I lose sight of what's the purpose behind what you're doing, Theo. And when I'm able to connect back to the purpose, then I'm like, you know what? I'm worn out, but I feel like I've done valuable work today. I feel like I've done valuable work this week. So I think that everybody right now just struggles with balancing the functional aspects. Those are the things that make the job profitable, uh, efficient, productive, along with the purpose, which is the empathic, emotional part of what we do. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's so interesting because I collected feedback for one of my clients earlier this week and actually last week. And that was a theme, right? People really admired this executive for her vision, right? And her ability to get things done. But what was missing was the why, right? Because they want to know what impact they're having on the organization, right? And so consistently they were like, she gives us direction, but she doesn't tell us the why. And I want to know the why of what we're doing. That gives it meaning for me and helps me understand how I'm contributing to the larger organization. So I love the distinction that you make between function
Mm-hmm.
and purpose. So
Mm-hmm.
from an organizational perspective, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I ask leaders to do is go above that, because before you can talk about that as it relates to your career and even your life, well, your life, you got to think about who am I as a person, right? And how, what is my purpose as I define it? And how is that purpose aligned with everything else I decide to do? So,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's the organization that I choose to work with, how I interact with my team, how I interact with my family, how I make them a priority, all of that really has to be linked to how I see myself and what my purpose is. And I know we've been talking about this purpose thing a lot. So actually, last night I was thinking about um, I've always said, before I even knew, before my career was really going strong and I had a sense of what I was going to be doing, and maybe it's directed me though, really, which is the other thing about personal purpose. It directs us even sometimes when we don't realize it. But I've always said that my purpose is to maximize the potential of others, right? And now I'm doing it in the true sense, right? Before I was doing it through an organization, but now I'm doing it in the true sense. So even as I coach, when people are pushing back, hey, that's out of my comfort zone, I'm not doing it. I have to remind them and myself, because sometimes it could be that, you deal with these powerful leaders and they can be rather strong. You're like, well, am I pushing too hard? No. I remind myself, your purpose is to maximize the potential of others. And so my purpose in our partnership is to maximize your potential. We cannot maximize your potential without you coming outside of your comfort zone. So also articulating that purpose to others so they understand, this is what I stand for. It's not just the organization, but I'm here because this is what I stand for. So I don't know. What are your thoughts about that?
I love that. I'd like to make 2 points about that. One is that if I go back and look through my career,
Uh-huh.
I've made several pivots. I'm all about pivoting. And
Right.
when I've made professional pivots, it's always been that I no longer find purpose in doing this. I no longer
Mhm.
find value and meaning. It's just functional.
Right.
It's
Right.
just a job. It's just a
Right.
paycheck, which is
Right.
okay. But that's what creates more burnout when you're able to connect back to, what, there's an underlying value behind what I'm doing, or under the foundation for what I'm doing. But I think
Mhm.
about when for many years I was an HR professional, and then I got to a point where there was no more purpose in that. I pivoted to becoming a learning and development professional. And then I did that for many years. And then I got to a point where I felt, I'm kind of losing the value in doing this. It's kind of seeming like we're just checking off the list, that people
Mhm.
went through the training, that they took the online. I don't want to do that. So I pivoted into consulting people to increase customer service, the customer experience, and did that for many years. And then that got to a point where it's like, you know what? Companies really, they don't have their heart in this anymore. And then I decided that, you know what? I have so many people that ask me, I'm already kind of informally coaching people. Let me make another pivot into that. And so that's
Mhm.
how I arrived at, we've talked about this many times. That's how I
Mhm.
arrived at where I am today. And one more thing, I write things down. You know me, you're always telling me,
Mhm. Mhm.
be yourself. But I always write things down. And when I thought about the function, my function as a executive coach, the job
Mhm.
description, the tasks, and then what's the purpose? And do I really, am I intentional about making sure that I balance them so I don't become burnt
Right.
out? Right now, I got 20 people that I'm coaching, which is,
A lot.
it's good, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's invigorating, but it's a lot. But when I think about my function as an executive coach, I wrote down that the task, the job description is to assess leadership strengths, gaps, and blind spots. That's when people are enrolled in my program. Theo, I want you to help them create some self-awareness so that they see where their blind spots are and look and help them with ways to close that so they can become a more effective executive. my function or another task is to provide actionable feedback and perspective, to guide them in goal setting and accountability so that they can make sustainable change. And I could go on and on and on, they offer a safe, confidential space for reflection and problem solving and on and on. And all that's good. That's the task. But the true purpose, when I think about how many people, when it's time for them to complete the sessions or the program, they're like, no, they don't want to stop because my purpose is to be, again, a sounding board to listen more than I actually give guidance, because a lot of times they know it's in them. They know they're just not doing. The book that was written a couple of years ago called The Knowing Doing Gap, that most leaders know exactly what they need to do, 80% to be better, to improve the organization, but only about 20% do it. So my job is to really help them close that gap. So through listening, I wrote down that my purpose is to listen, to be a sounding board, an accountability partner, to help them unlock their full potential as a leader, to inspire transformation, not just skill development. Sometimes people are like, I don't know why people think this is a class. They're like, I'm in your class. And I'm like, no, but it's about having meaningful conversations and touch points where we look at what are challenges and helping you to realize how to close them. So, every now and then, even a coach has to go back and look at what's the purpose of all of this that I'm doing.
What am I doing? Right. What am I doing and why am I doing it? So you said something that I hate this word, but I'm going to use it anyway, that triggered me. Because you said, well, maybe it's not purpose aligned. Maybe I'm just working to get the paycheck, and that's okay. And so what I wrote down was, no, it's not okay. That is not okay. Right. Because that's how we get 15, 20 years into our career and realize, how did I get here? I'm not happy. Like, what the heck? Right. And so I think it's so easy sometimes to think about, well, I've got a family to take care of. There are bills to pay. There's the mortgage, there's that, college, da. But even in all of that, I think that it should be done in a way that's joyful and aligned, right? And joy comes from living and fulfilling our purpose, right? So it's like, it's win-win. I'm doing something that's aligned with my purpose and I'm serving my family, right? Giving them what they need. So I guess, and I think that's particularly prevalent, that mindset is particularly prevalent with the younger generation now, I think, because they are looking for alignment. I don't think they necessarily call it purpose, but they are looking to do things that are satisfying and give them joy, right? And that's why I think their tolerance for what we as baby boomers got used to, they can't tolerate that, because it's not like, well, why would we do it that way? It's not comfortable. It's not this, it's not that. And so I think that we need to really begin to shift how we think about work. And I always tell clients, not only is the organization looking to fill a role, but you're looking for the right organization. So you don't go into an interview hoping they pick you. You go into an interview assessing whether this is the right fit for you, and do you want to pick them?
Right.
Right. So I just think that part of our conversations being uncensored, I think it's okay to push people to the left, not politically, but the left in terms of really thinking outside of the box, right? Thinking, the thing that somebody's going to say to you, well, that's crazy talk. No, it's not crazy talk. That's what works for me, right? Yeah. So, because I think about when I first started executive coaching, my primary focus, even though now 95% of my portfolio is Black women, but at the time, my primary focus, I didn't want to coach anybody except for Black women. And when I shared that, this was 15 years ago, before Black women became a thing, people would tell me, that's too limiting. Nobody's going to pay you. Black women would rather buy shoes and handbags They're not going to pay you to coach them. And for a minute, it swayed me. But I was so clear about what my purpose was in that moment. I was like, I don't care what people say. I don't care. That's what's pulling me, because that's the thing, other thing about purpose. What pulls you, right? Pay attention to what's pulling you. And that pulled me. And had I been swayed, I don't think that I would be where I am now in my business, because I'd be trying to figure out, well, who am I? Who should I be serving? When I was really clear in my head about what the alignment was, right? It didn't matter what other people said. It didn't matter. So I don't
You know
know.
what's important about that, what's interesting about that too, I think I told you that I'm doing a talk about generational, aligning multi-generational workforce, a multi-generational workforce, and looking
Yeah.
at, for each category, what do people want? What are their character traits? What really drives them? And I
Mm-hmm.
see a lot that for Gen Z, purpose, they want to
Mm-hmm.
have purpose in what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I would challenge that to not necessarily a category around if you were born from this time, from 19 or from 2000, whatever to whatever, you want that. But I think
Mm-hmm.
about when I was a 20-year-old, when I came into the corporate environment, I was probably about 23, just getting started as a
Mm-hmm.
little assistant. And
Mm-hmm.
even myself, I found that what I wanted, I didn't understand, I didn't have a definition for it.
Right.
I knew that I wanted to do something that
Mm-hmm.
would be meaningful. I just didn't know that that's what it was.
Right.
So I think that, you know, as we mature in our career, and like you said, as economically or financially, we grow up the economic ladder and there are more
Right.
responsibilities,
Right.
you somehow lose sight of that. And
Yeah.
you lose sight of that's important, yeah, the purpose, but I've got this big house and I got a nice car and all the fringe benefits and amenities that
Mm-hmm.
come as you continue to grow. You
Mm-hmm.
lose sight of that, and then one day you're in your 40s or 50s and there's a tremendous void. You got a
Mm-hmm.
nice paycheck, you've
Mm-hmm.
traveled all around the world and done great things with the corporation that you've worked with, but there's a
Mm-hmm.
tremendous void. So
Yeah.
that sometimes you have to make a break with, is this
That's right.
still true north? For
Right.
me, is this still aligned with
Mm-hmm.
with my purpose is?
Yeah.
Am I still balancing that?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I off kilter from what my
Yeah.
purpose is?
Yeah. And I just think we need to be more intentional, right? And that's basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
Just stop and pause and ask yourself, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And why am I doing it? What am I doing and why am I doing it?
Yeah.
And does it feel right for me? Right. And um, I think the more intentional we can be, and I'll tell you, I think that since COVID, it has really shifted the way people think about their lives and their careers. And I think more people
So true.
are beginning to think about that in terms of just alignment and joy and happiness, and how do I get that, and am I getting it in this leadership role that I hold now? Is there something that I want that is different, and what am I willing to do to make the pivot, right? So yeah.
I like that. I've got some, I was a part probably about 2 years ago of a Discord group. It's like, and it's pretty interesting that now we're talking about leadership uncensored. It was kind of like that, but it was around elevating the customer experience. And do people really care? So, when we talk about leadership uncensored, it really is to go there, to go where no man has gone or felt comfortable enough to go. So, I've got a couple of questions that I want to throw out. When I get caught up in my training, purpose, and you have to have purpose. And if you have purpose and value, it'll all work out. But, like you said earlier, when you mentioned a leader that really didn't know from their leader what the purpose was behind what they're doing. My question, I've got a couple, so I'm going to be looking down. The first one is it really up to the leader? I kind of think it is, but I still want to throw that out. Is it up to the leader to define what your purpose should be in your job. I mean, is that up to them? Is it a balance? What's your thoughts on that?
I think everyone, by the way, that's a great question. I think everyone has a responsibility to themselves to do work that's aligned with their purpose. Now, in the context of that work,
Mhm.
when their leader is giving directives or talking about what needs to be accomplished, it is important for the leader to connect that work to something bigger. Because I do think it is important for people to understand how they are impacting the organization. So you or I could be in a position that we believe is aligned with our purpose, but the work associated with that position, we want to know really specifically, how is this impacting the larger organization? How am I contributing to
Exactly.
that organization through this work? And I think that's a lot of what employee engagement surveys are all about, right? So there's a salary and all that other stuff, but then there's the, are you clear about why you do what you do? And how many surveys have you seen? I know I've seen a lot where people are like, no, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I don't know the why of it and how it impacts. I don't know whether that's upstream or downstream, but how it impacts the greater good or the larger organization. So I think it's a partnership. I think
Mhm.
when people come clear on their purpose, that's commitment and productivity and engagement. But if we don't help them tie that purpose to
Mhm.
the larger organization, that's when engagement begins to suffer, morale begins to suffer because people don't feel the joy of their work,
Mhm.
if that makes
I
sense.
agree. I agree. That makes a lot of sense. I just think about today, the vast majority of leaders that really don't get the level of development that they need so that as they move up the ladder, they realize the importance that you really set the tone as a leader and that you have to paint the picture of what we're trying to achieve, why
Exactly.
we're doing it, like you said, so that people can, if people understand the why, like you said, they're
Yeah.
more inclined
Mm-hmm.
to join in and be a
Mm-hmm.
part,
Mm-hmm.
of the team. And when they don't understand the why, sometimes it just seems like this is just busy work or it's just
Right.
silly. But the
Right.
leader is so integral in that. Here's another question for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this was my first question, but I kind of derailed. Do you think, and I'm just throwing this out because these are questions people sometimes have in their head. Do you think this whole concept or notion of purpose is kind of overrated today when you think about the corporate world today? Everybody's moving towards artificial intelligence. Do we really need people? There's so much going on, there's so much flux in organizations today. This whole concept of having purpose and what you do and the why, is that overrated, or do you think that that is still important as a part of an organization's culture?
I think it's even more important with all these other variables, right? And so I'm still not sure what it looks like in terms of inside of organizations, like how, to what extent, they'll be leveraging AI and how that will impact the overall employment of people. But I think in the case where people do, first of all, I see it as a resource, right? So I think people should leverage it to work more efficiently and to increase their productivity.
Yes.
I'm always talking to my clients about how they can leverage AI to save time, right? Um, but I also think that if it ever got to a point, Theo, where people are displaced, understanding what your purpose is even more important because that goes to the now what, right? And even without AI, but just the way the economy has gone and organizations are always downsizing. And we're hearing this trend of all these entrepreneurs, right? All these small businesses starting. And I think it's because people are connecting to their purpose. They're finally saying, well, here's my opportunity. You know,
Yes.
this is really what brings me joy anyway. And so
Mhm.
I'm going to invest my time and my dollars in building this thing, which is actually more work. But if it brings you joy because it's aligned with your purpose, it's worth it. And I think that mindset, I always say, I'm wondering, it'll be interesting to see 20 years from now what the economy looks like based on all of these small businesses that started before COVID, after COVID, but just as a result of all these downsizes. Like I work with one organization, they do a major restructuring every single year. And the restructuring is not about weeding out performance issues. It's about how do we as an organization become more effective and more thinking more in terms of our bottom line. How do we profit more, right? So people who are excellent at their jobs are being displaced. They're getting good packages, but they're being displaced. But when that happens, okay, well, let me use these resources to do work that's aligned with who I am. So I think I don't think people talk enough about it.
Mhm.
And again, I think people need to be more conscious of what's my purpose. And we can think of purpose in terms of legacy as well. Like, so, because none of us are here forever. Like, what do I want to leave behind? And how will my work represent that? So I think it needs to be even more prevalent in terms of the way people think.
Mhm. I like that. For so long, people were ironclad to
Mhm.
corporations because
Mhm.
the benefits,
Mhm.
insurance, so many
Mhm.
things that, PTO, so many things that newership, excuse me, why people want to be an entrepreneur. It's a financial sacrifice for many people to take that jump. But I think
Mhm.
that in light of all that's going on now and so much uncertainty, if ever more people are really beginning to take a second look at, like you said, am I connected with my purpose, with what really brings
Mhm.
value and meaning to me and what I really want to be doing? I told you the
Mhm.
last time that in ninth grade or eighth grade, I was like, I want to be a psychologist. And I tell everybody this story. Everybody just laughed hysterically. I was so embarrassed. And I would say they laughed because they didn't know what that meant.
But what?
But but here we are, a half a century later.
And here, not a psychologist, but the closest thing to it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is that when we're coaching, so many people will say, oh, this is kind of like my therapy session. I know you're not my therapist, but they just want somebody to listen. They just want to vent. They just want somebody to validate or either to say, okay, we need to put the brakes on that because that's just not sustainable or that will move you in the wrong direction. And I just think that when people get closer, more closely connected with their purpose, burnout will not matter. It will still happen, won't matter as much because I'm doing good work. I'm doing something that I feel is going to benefit the greater good. So while I think sometimes people feel that, that's blasé, this purpose stuff, this will be the trajectory, I think, for people in this new, I want to sound new agey, but in this new time that we're in with artificial intelligence, not really knowing where you fit, that if you follow your purpose, you'll find where you fit.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you and I share so much in common because in high school, I said the same thing. I want to be a psychologist. I think I told you until I realized what it took to be a psychologist. Had I known I was going to have the DR anyway, I probably would have done it. But I do believe I am where I'm supposed to be because the same people say this feels like a therapy session, but a lot of my clients
Mhm.
build their team with a coach and a therapist, right? So
Oh,
that kind of gives me peace of mind that they know
yes.
I do not serve in that role. But what I think you made a great closing point, but I'm
Mhm.
wondering what other like what's one or two things that you would want to leave people with as it relates to this idea of purpose?
Yeah, I think every now and then, And the holidays are a great time because usually during the holidays, maybe you have a little extended time off. It's just
Mhm.
to sit back and really reflect. During the holidays, take a little bit of time, whatever holiday that is, take a little bit of time, a day or two, to just sit back, don't do anything, and reflect on what have I accomplished? What do I want to do in the future? Is it aligned to my purpose? And if it's not, it's just a great time to focus, to make that pivot, to say, what must I start doing, stop doing, or continue doing that's going to hit me in the right trajectory? When I started, I gave the example of a physician that I'm working with, and she said a friend of hers told her that she needs to take 2 months off, a sabbatical, because it's just a whirlwind of busyness, and sometimes you just don't know where you are, except you just keep
Mhm.
going. And I
Mhm.
said, I felt that for me, sometimes it's like that too, but I'm not in a job that I could say, okay, I could take a month off, or I could take a two months off. She probably could too. But the reflection, just taking that time to reflect, even if it's just a few days, that's what I would say to anybody. At some point, you've got to take a little bit of time to reflect and look at, am I headed in the right direction of happiness, a balance? Because when we're out of tune or misaligned with our purpose, life is going to be chaotic, stressful, imbalanced. So take that time to kind of step back and look at, regroup, what do I need to do to get back in sync with my purpose? Because that's important. It's important to have value and meaning in what you do. So that's what I would leave
Yes.
with people. Any insight, that what would you tell someone?
I, you know, I would just ditto what you shared, and I think just repeating something I mentioned earlier is it's not foo-foo. It's really, to your point, we need to be intentional about what's going to bring us joy in our lives, and you can have joy and make money, right? The two are not mutually exclusive. You may have to be more selective, so it may take you longer to get where you're trying to go. But when you land, you'll be like, whew, this was the right thing to do. So to your point, I just think being intentional and making the time. Because we say take the time, people won't always take the time, but intentionality says I'm making the time to really give some thought around this. And I think where we are with the year closing, it's a great time to really just sit back and, to use your word, to reflect and to really recalibrate for 2026.
That's my word of the day, recalibrate. Thank you so much for that. That's awesome. Thank you
You're
for that.
welcome. You're welcome. This is a great conversation, Theo.